Dear learners, welcome back to WSE True Stories, where English learning becomes an unforgettable adventure. Today, we invite you into a story that has mesmerized generations. She was a symbol of beauty, a global icon, a woman whose smile could light up the screen, and yet behind that dazzling image was a soul burdened by loneliness, struggle, and the high cost of fame. This is the story of Marilyn Monroe, not just the Hollywood legend, but the fragile, brilliant woman who lived beneath the spotlight. This is not just a story about glamour or celebrity. It's a journey into a life shaped by abandonment, ambition, betrayal, and resilience. A story that helps you improve your English, but more than that, it will open your heart to the pain and power of one of the most misunderstood women in history. Through this story, you'll learn not only English vocabulary and expressions related to life, fame, and struggle, but also explore deep emotional truths. You'll discover how language can carry both knowledge and empathy. So, get ready for the most haunting, powerful, and inspirational story we've ever told. If you'd like to support the channel and unlock some exclusive perks, just click the join button below. We'll share more about the membership program at the end of this video. Let's begin the journey of Marilyn Monroe, the woman who paid the price of beauty and fame. She was born as Norma Jeane Mortensen on June 1, 1926, in Los Angeles, California. But even at birth, her name was uncertain, a sign of the instability that would mark her entire life. Her mother, Gladys Pearl Baker, struggled with mental illness and was unable to care for her. Her father was absent. Norma Jeane never knew the comfort of a stable family. Instead, she grew up in foster homes and orphanages, passed from one caretaker to another like a suitcase no one wanted to claim. In a time when America was crawling out of the Great Depression and heading toward World War II, the country was full of contradictions, booming industry but broken families, dreams of freedom yet deep social inequality. For a little girl like Norma Jeane, the world seemed both too big and too cold. She was shy, often overlooked, and longed for affection. But even in those early years, there was something about her, a softness, a light, an undeniable charm that some noticed even before she could understand what it meant. As a child, she would often stare into the mirror, practicing her smile, not knowing that one day it would become the most famous smile in the world. But behind that smile, a storm was already brewing. She was placed in more than 10 different homes before she turned 16. In some, she experienced kindness. In others, neglect, and worse. These early experiences left her with a deep need to be seen, to be loved, and to prove that she mattered. When Norma Jeane was just 15, a decision was made to marry her off to avoid being sent back to an orphanage. She married James Doherty, a 21-year-old neighbor, and began her life as a housewife. It was a way out, but not a way forward. While she tried to fit into the traditional role expected of women at the time, a part of her remained restless, unfulfilled, and yearning for something more. This was a time in American history when women were expected to be quiet, obedient, and decorative. But Norma Jeane wasn't made for silence. She would soon discover that her beauty, often seen as a curse, could also be her gateway to something bigger. But that was only the beginning. A new world was about to open, one of cameras, contracts, and cruel expectations. It all began with a photograph. While her husband was serving in the Merchant Marine during World War II, Norma Jeane took a job at a munitions factory, like many other women at the time, stepping into roles once held by men. One day, a military photographer came to the factory to document the women behind the war effort. He noticed her immediately. Her natural beauty. her magnetic presence. She wasn't just photogenic, she glowed. That photograph led to more. Soon, modeling agencies were calling. Offers came in, and her image began appearing in magazines. She was transformed from a factory worker to a pin-up girl almost overnight. With each new photo, the world began to take notice. But to be taken seriously in Hollywood, she had to let go of her past, including her name. Thus, Norma Jeane became Marilyn Monroe, a name chosen for its marketable rhythm and allure. But with her new identity came a new set of problems. Marilyn quickly realized that the Hollywood dream wasn't as glamorous as it seemed. The studios saw her as a product, not a person. They expected her to play the dumb blonde, the innocent, sexy woman who never challenged anyone or anything. Directors didn't ask what she thought. Producers didn't care how she felt. She was there to look good, say her lines, and sell tickets. Inside, Marilyn was anything but dumb. She read poetry. She studied acting seriously, first at the Actors Studio in New York. She was fascinated by psychology and spirituality. She longed for meaningful roles. But no matter how hard she tried to prove her depth, the industry boxed her in, reducing her to surface appeal. Worse still, she faced constant sexual harassment behind the scenes. Many powerful men in the film world saw her as something to possess, not someone to respect. She was expected to smile through it all, to be charming, even when humiliated, graceful even when mistreated. This constant battle between her public image and private reality began to wear on her spirit. And then came the rumors. That she was difficult to work with. That she was unstable. That she was late to set because she was lazy. Few knew that behind her lateness were panic attacks and insomnia. Few cared that her insecurities were rooted in childhood abandonment and trauma. All they saw was the starlet, fragile, beautiful, replaceable. But Marilyn refused to disappear quietly. She knew she had talent. She knew she had a voice. And even if the world saw her only as a pretty face, she was determined to prove there was so much more beneath the surface. She was just getting started. She was about to step out of the frame and take control of the story. The year was 1953. Marilyn Monroe had become a rising star. With roles in Niagara, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and How to Marry a Millionaire, she was now one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood. Her image, glamorous, flirtatious, and innocent, was everywhere. But behind the success, Marilyn was still fighting to be taken seriously as an artist, not just a sex symbol. While the world adored her, few truly respected her. The film studios controlled her contracts, dictated her wardrobe, her lines, even her weight. They treated her like a product, packaged for mass consumption. She was making millions for 20th Century Fox, but earning far less than her male co-stars. She began to push back. She challenged the pay gap. She demanded script approval. And she refused roles that repeated the same tired stereotypes. That was risky. Studio executives were furious. They called her ungrateful, impossible, even dangerous. At one point, Fox suspended her for rejecting a role she found demeaning. But Marilyn didn't cave. Instead, she left Hollywood and did something no one expected. In 1955, she moved to New York City and enrolled at the Actors Studio to study under Lee Strasberg, the legendary acting coach known for his method acting approach. This was a bold move. Most stars didn't train again at the height of their careers. But Marilyn was serious. She sat quietly in the back row, nervous yet determined, surrounded by young unknown actors who never thought the glamorous Monroe would share their classroom. Strasberg saw something in her. Not just talent, but hunger. She wanted to feel her roles, not just perform them. Slowly, she began to grow, to break down her emotional walls. She cried in rehearsals. She listened. She worked harder than anyone expected. And for the first time, she started to believe she was more than what Hollywood told her to be. During this time, she also formed her own production company, Marilyn Monroe Productions, an unheard-of move for an actress in the 1950s. It was her declaration of independence. She wanted creative control. She wanted to choose meaningful scripts and elevate her craft. It was the beginning of her transformation, from a studio puppet to a powerful woman in charge of her destiny. But there were costs. Her personal life remained turbulent. Her marriage to Joe DiMaggio, the baseball legend, had ended in heartbreak. Though he loved her, he couldn't accept her fame. He wanted her to be less visible, less desired, less independent. Marilyn couldn't live like that. Later, she married playwright Arthur Miller, hoping to find someone who understood her soul. But that marriage, too, would become complicated, caught between admiration, disillusionment, and public scrutiny. Yet through it all, Marilyn kept rising. In 1956, she returned to Hollywood on her terms, and delivered one of her finest performances in Bus Stop, finally earning the critical praise she had longed for. Critics were stunned. This wasn't just the blonde bombshell they had mocked. This was a woman with depth, timing, emotion, and intelligence. A real actress. And yet, something deeper was still unraveling inside her. Let's pause for a moment. Do you think Marilyn made the right decision to walk away from the studio system and start over? Would you have taken that risk if it meant losing everything? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Because Marilyn's fight was far from over. While the public cheered, the shadows behind the spotlight only grew darker. In 1960, Marilyn Monroe stood at a crossroads. She had returned to Hollywood not as a contract player but as a producer and a respected actress. Some Like It Hot had just been released the year before and was a massive hit, both commercially and critically. Her performance was electric. It earned her a Golden Globe and secured her place as one of the greatest comedic talents of her generation. But success doesn't always bring peace. Behind the scenes, Marilyn's life was unraveling. The years of pressure, of being objectified, misunderstood, and used, had taken a toll on her mental and physical health. She struggled with depression, anxiety, and insomnia. She became increasingly dependent on sleeping pills and medications to regulate her moods. Her reputation for being late to set, sometimes missing entire days of shooting, wasn't just about being difficult, she was battling invisible pain. That pain exploded during the filming of The Misfits, a movie written by her then-husband Arthur Miller, supposedly as a tribute to her. But instead of feeling seen and loved, Marilyn felt exposed. The script seemed to echo her real-life sadness, and the emotional strain of performing it, while her marriage was falling apart, pushed her to the edge. The Misfits would be her final completed film. Shortly after, Marilyn and Arthur Miller divorced. Her trust was shattered. The one man she believed saw her soul had turned her life into a screenplay. She felt betrayed, again, not just by love, but by the art that once gave her meaning. And yet, even in her darkest moments, Marilyn remained a symbol of beauty and desire to the world. Presidents invited her to parties. Photographers chased her through the streets. And then, in 1962, came that moment, one that would define her public image forever. It was President John F. Kennedy's birthday celebration at Madison Square Garden. Marilyn walked onto the stage in a skin-tight, sparkling dress and sang "Happy Birthday, Mr. President" in her breathy, seductive voice. The crowd gasped. Cameras flashed. Her performance was iconic, unforgettable. But behind the performance was a woman exhausted, fragile, and rapidly losing her sense of self. That moment sparked countless rumors. Was she romantically involved with the president? With his brother? Was she being used by the powerful once again? We may never know the full truth. But we do know this: Marilyn felt more alone than ever before. Fame, power, even wealth, none of it had brought her the love she truly craved. She tried to find peace. She entered therapy, tried to reconnect with old friends, and even attempted to rebuild her career by signing on to new films. But the media was relentless. They hounded her, criticized her appearance, speculated on her mental state. Her humanity was never part of the headline. She had become a myth, and myths are not allowed to be weak, or human, or sad. In the summer of 1962, Marilyn bought a modest home in Brentwood, California. For the first time, it was hers, not a rented space, not a hotel room, but her own. She hung mirrors, planted flowers, and filled the rooms with light. She told friends she was ready for a fresh start. But just a few weeks later, on August 5th, Marilyn Monroe was found dead in her bedroom. She was only 36 years old. Her death was ruled a probable suicide. Others suspected foul play. To this day, her passing remains surrounded by mystery and conspiracy. What do you think? Was Marilyn a victim of her fame, or a fighter crushed by a world that refused to see her truth? Was her downfall inevitable, or could something, or someone, have saved her? Let us know what you believe. Because behind the legend was always a human being, a woman named Norma Jeane, who fought to be seen, to be loved, and to live on her own terms. But even in death, her voice echoed louder than ever. The final chapter of Marilyn Monroe's life wasn't just about tragedy. It was also about resistance, quiet, desperate, and deeply human. In the last year of her life, Marilyn was making a final attempt to reclaim her story, even as the forces around her threatened to consume her. After the heartbreak of the Misfits and her divorce from Arthur Miller, Marilyn tried to rise once more. She re-signed with 20th Century Fox and began filming Something's Got to Give. It was supposed to be her comeback. She had a new home, new plans, and even spoke about wanting to be a mother, a dream that had always remained just out of reach. But the pressures returned quickly. The studio expected perfection, even as she battled chronic illness and mental health struggles. They refused to accommodate her needs. When she missed filming due to illness, they labeled her unreliable and fired her, publicly, humiliatingly. That decision devastated her. She had spent her entire life trying to prove that she wasn't just beautiful, she was capable, professional, worthy. And once again, the system had cast her aside. It was a cruel echo of her childhood, of being abandoned, misunderstood, and blamed for things beyond her control. But Marilyn didn't give up. In private, she reached out to old allies, people who had believed in her talent and her heart. She started to rebuild trust with the press. She gave interviews where she showed intelligence, humor, and self-awareness, offering glimpses of the real woman behind the icon. One journalist wrote, "She is not what you think. She is more." She even began negotiations with the studio to be rehired for Something's Got to Give, and they agreed. Marilyn was going to return. She was going to finish the film. She was going to start again. But she was also carrying immense emotional weight. Her relationships, romantic and professional, had become strained. Friends worried that she was isolating herself. She had trouble sleeping, trouble eating. Some nights, she would sit by herself, journaling, writing poetry, trying to sort through the chaos in her mind. In one of her last recorded writings, she penned, "I am alone. I am always alone no matter what. It's hard to imagine the cost of being Marilyn Monroe. The cost of being a fantasy for the world, while no one bothered to ask what she needed." She had given everything, her image, her time, her voice, even her identity, to a system that celebrated her and destroyed her in equal measure. And yet, even in her final weeks, Marilyn made a choice. She chose to keep fighting. She chose to believe that a better version of herself, the one who was loved for her mind, her strength, her truth, was still possible. That is the ultimate tragedy and triumph of Marilyn Monroe. She didn't die because she was weak. She died because she had carried the weight of 1,000 expectations for far too long, with too little help and too little mercy. And in that final chapter, we see the full picture, not just the Hollywood star, but the human being who sacrificed peace for dreams, comfort for courage, silence for self-expression. What does it cost to be loved by the world, but not by yourself? That's the haunting question Marilyn leaves us with. But her story doesn't end with her final breath. Because what came next was a kind of immortality, not the one she asked for, but the one the world would never let go. Marilyn Monroe passed away on August 5, 1962, at the age of 36. The world stopped. The headlines blared her name. Crowds gathered outside her home. The mystery surrounding her death, whether accidental or intentional, only deepened the legend. But for those who truly loved her, this wasn't just a news story. It was a heartbreak. A light had gone out far too soon. And yet, somehow, Marilyn Monroe never really disappeared. In the years following her death, something remarkable happened. She didn't fade into memory like many stars do. Instead, her image grew, more powerful, more iconic. The blonde curls. The white dress above the subway grate. The sultry voice. The wounded eyes. She became a symbol, frozen in time, representing both the magic and the madness of fame. But Marilyn's greatest achievement wasn't her beauty. It wasn't even her films. It was her impact. She changed how we talk about women in media. She exposed the cruelty of the studio system, the double standards of fame, and the silent battles behind the spotlight. Her life helped spark conversations about mental health, abuse, and the objectification of women, long before those topics were widely accepted. And she did it not by being perfect, but by being honest, even in her silence. Artists, writers, and musicians across generations have been inspired by her. Andy Warhol turned her into pop art. Elton John wrote songs about her spirit. Writers like Norman Mailer and Joyce Carol Oates explored her complexity in books and films. In every decade, someone rediscovers Marilyn and sees something different. For some, she is beauty. For others, tragedy. For many, she is strength. Her face is everywhere, on posters, in fashion, in museums. But the true victory is not that she became an icon. It's that she made the world feel something. Even today, she reminds us that fame without love is empty. That dreams can come true, but they come at a cost. And that behind every perfect smile might be a story we haven't taken the time to understand. Perhaps that's why we still say her name. Because Marilyn Monroe wasn't just a star. She was a mirror, showing us what we value, what we ignore, and what it means to be seen. She lived a short life. But she left behind a long legacy. What can we learn from Marilyn Monroe's life? Was she a cautionary tale? A victim of fame? Or a symbol of something deeper? Perhaps the truth is that Marilyn was all of those things, and more. She came into the world unwanted and left it adored. But that journey between those 2 points was never simple. It was filled with pain, longing, triumph, and contradiction. And that's exactly why her story still speaks to us. White heavy check mark. She teaches us that beauty alone is never enough. Marilyn was considered the most beautiful woman in the world. But inside, she battled insecurity and loneliness. Fame gave her attention, but not love. Applause filled rooms, but not the emptiness in her heart. She reminds us that external success cannot replace inner peace. White heavy check mark. She shows the power of vulnerability. Unlike many stars who crafted perfect images, Marilyn let her cracks show. Her nervous stutter, her emotional fragility, her hunger to be taken seriously, these weren't hidden. She was flawed, and that made her real. Her vulnerability became her strength, even if it also made her fragile. White heavy check mark. She exposes the cost of being misunderstood. Hollywood saw her as a product, not a person. The world wanted her smile but ignored her sorrow. She was labeled dumb, difficult, unstable, yet few took the time to listen. Her life reminds us of the danger of judging people only by what they appear to be. White heavy check mark. She fought for something more. Behind the scenes, Marilyn was reading Dostoevsky, studying acting with Lee Strasberg, and producing her own films, rare for women at the time. She wanted to grow. She refused to be just a pretty face. That ambition still inspires women today to break barriers, demand respect, and take ownership of their lives. So, what is the meaning of her life? Maybe it's this: even the most admired people can feel invisible. Even those who have everything on the outside may be starving on the inside. And even when the world seems to adore you, what really matters is whether you've learned to love yourself. Marilyn's life asks us powerful questions. Do we see people clearly, or only as reflections of our desires? Do we value others for their soul, or just their image? And are we listening to the quiet cries behind the glamorous smiles? She once said, "I want to be loved for who I am, not what I look like." That line echoes today, in every young person chasing likes, every performer battling pressure, and every human being longing to be seen for who they truly are. In Marilyn Monroe's story, we see ourselves, our hopes, our hurts, our hunger to matter. She wasn't perfect. But she was human, brilliantly, painfully human. And that may be the most powerful lesson of all. More than 60 years after her death, Marilyn Monroe still haunts our imagination. Her image is printed on T-shirts, painted in galleries, studied in universities. But beneath the layers of glamour and gossip, there remains the real woman, Norma Jeane, the little girl who never stopped searching for love, truth, and a place to belong. Her legacy isn't just about Hollywood. It's about all of us. Every time someone hides their pain behind a smile, every time a woman is told she's too emotional, too ambitious, or just a pretty face, Marilyn's story echoes. She reminds us that being seen is not the same as being known. She reminds us that fame without self-love is a fragile crown. And she reminds us that even a symbol, even a legend, is still just a person, doing their best to survive. In the end, Marilyn Monroe was not just a star. She was a soul, shining, breaking, rising, all at once. And perhaps that's why she still captivates us. Because Marilyn Monroe didn't just light up the screen. She lit up the world, and left behind a glow we're still trying to understand.